I never expected poker night to change my life, but that's exactly what happened when Callan moved in 2 doors down from me. It started innocently enough, the way most things do. My building has this monthly poker game in the recreation room, and I'd been going for about a year. Just neighbors playing for small stakes, drinking beer, talking trash, nothing serious. Then, one Tuesday evening in October, I walked in and saw him for the first time. He was sitting in my usual seat, which should have annoyed me, but I couldn't even process irritation because I was too busy trying not to stare. Dark hair that fell just slightly over his forehead, this angular jaw that caught the overhead light, and these incredibly focused green eyes studying his cards like they held the secrets of the universe. When he looked up and caught me standing there, he smiled, and I swear something in my chest just stopped working properly. I'm Marcus, by the way. 32, software engineer. Generally pretty good at keeping my life orderly and predictable. I'd dated women through college and my 20s, had a couple of serious relationships that fizzled out for reasons I could never quite articulate. My friends always said I seemed distracted, like I was waiting for something but didn't know what. Turns out they were right. That first night, I took the seat across from Callan, and we played until almost midnight. He was good, really good, reading people's tells and knowing exactly when to fold and when to push. But what struck me more than his skill was how he talked. Not just the usual poker table banter, but real conversation. Between hands, he told stories about growing up in Portland, about his job as a graphic designer, about the weird vintage record collection he was building. His voice had this quality that made you want to lean in closer, like he was sharing something just for you, even when he was talking to the whole table. I won a small pot that night, maybe $40. Callan won big, nearly 200. We all settled up, and I thought that would be it. Just a nice evening, a new neighbor, nothing more. I walked back to my apartment, number 312, made some tea, and tried to read before bed. But I kept thinking about the way Callan's hands looked shuffling cards, these long fingers moving with casual precision. I told myself I was just impressed by his technique. I told myself a lot of things that night. The next morning, I opened my mailbox to grab my usual pile of junk mail and bills, and there was an envelope with no address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a $20 bill and a note on plain paper. It said, "Hey Marcus, you mentioned your nephew's birthday is coming up. Put this toward a good present. Thanks for the game last night. Callan." I stood in the mailroom holding that 20 and feeling something I couldn't name. It was such a small gesture, but it hit me harder than it should have. I'd mentioned my nephew Jacob exactly once, in passing, during a hand where I was distracted, thinking about what to get a 12-year-old boy. Callan had not only remembered, but he'd done something about it. I tucked the bill and note into my wallet and carried them around all day, pulling them out at random moments just to make sure I hadn't imagined it. The next poker night was 2 weeks later, and I'd thought about Callan more than I wanted to admit in the interim. I'd see him occasionally in the hallway or the parking lot, and we'd chat for a few minutes. Easy conversations about nothing important. But I started noticing things. The way he'd rest his hand on the wall when we talked, leaning in slightly. How he laughed with his whole body, not just his voice. The small scar above his left eyebrow that I wanted to ask about, but never found the courage to mention. He won again that second night. Not as much. Maybe $80. I broke even, which I considered a victory given how distracted I was every time Callan looked at me across the table. There was this moment, probably around 10 o'clock, when we both reached for the chip bowl at the same time, and our hands brushed. It lasted maybe half a second, but I felt it everywhere. He pulled back with this quick smile, said sorry, and I mumbled something incoherent. Real smooth, Marcus. Real smooth. The next day, there was another envelope in my mailbox. This time it was a $10 bill and a note that said, "Coffee's on me next time we run into each other. That hand you played with the King 7 offsuit was gutsy. Almost worked too. Callan." I kept that note too. Started a small collection in my desk drawer, though at that point it was only 2. I didn't understand what he was doing or why, but I knew I looked forward to finding those envelopes more than I looked forward to the actual poker games, which was saying something, because I'd started counting down the days until the next game like a teenager waiting for summer vacation. We did get that coffee, actually. Ran into each other at the cafe on the corner about a week later. I was picking up my usual morning order before work, and he was there with a laptop, working on some design project. He waved me over, and I ended up sitting with him for almost an hour, completely losing track of time. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me about a difficult client who wanted a logo redesigned for the 5th time. I told him about a coding problem that had been driving me crazy for days. He listened like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard, asking follow-up questions, offering suggestions that were actually insightful. When I finally looked at my phone and realized I was going to be late for work, I jumped up apologizing. Callan laughed and said, "Go, go. But hey, we should do this again. Maybe intentionally next time, not just by accident." I agreed, probably too enthusiastically, and practically ran to my car. Spent the whole drive to work replaying the conversation, analyzing every word, every expression. My co-worker, Janet, asked me why I was smiling at my computer screen, and I realized I'd been grinning like an idiot for 20 minutes straight. The poker games continued through November and into December. Callan didn't win every time, but he won more often than not. And every single time he won, there'd be an envelope in my mailbox within a day or two. Never the whole amount, just a portion. $10 here, 20 there. Each one came with a note. Sometimes they referenced something from the game, a particular hand or a joke someone had made. Sometimes they were more personal. One said, "For the book you mentioned wanting to read, or let me know if it's any good." Another said, "Saw you looking tired yesterday. Take yourself out for a nice dinner. You deserve it." I should have said something. Should have told him he didn't need to keep doing this, that it was too much. But I didn't, because those notes had become the best part of my weeks. I'd read them over and over, studying his handwriting, trying to decode what they meant. Were they just friendly gestures from a nice guy who happened to be generous? Or were they something more? The question terrified me, because somewhere along the way, my feelings had shifted into territory I'd never explored before. I wasn't just looking forward to seeing Callan. I was thinking about him constantly, wondering what he was doing, if he thought about me too, what it would feel like to reach across the table during a poker game and just hold his hand. I'd wake up from dreams where we were together, really together, and the ache of returning to reality was almost physical. I'd never felt this way about any of the women I'd dated. Never had this constant pull, this magnetic need to be near someone. And that realization was doing a number on my entire understanding of myself. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, is this what I've been missing? Is this why nothing else ever felt quite right? The questions were overwhelming, but underneath the confusion was something else. Something that felt like relief. Like finally understanding a language I'd been hearing my whole life without comprehension. In mid-December, we had our holiday poker game. Someone had brought fancy beer, and there were cookies from the bakery down the street. The mood was festive. Everyone a little louder and more relaxed than usual. Callan was wearing this dark green sweater that made his eyes even more striking, and I had to actively stop myself from staring. We played for hours, and I was actually doing well for once, up about $60 by 11 o'clock. Then came the hand that I still replay in my mind. I had pocket aces, the best starting hand in poker. The flop came down with another ace and 2 random cards, giving me 3 of a kind. I bet strong, and everyone folded except Callan. He called, and I could see him studying me, trying to figure out what I had. The turn card was meaningless, and I bet again. He raised. My heart was pounding. Partly from the game. Partly from the way he was looking at me. This intense focus that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. The river card came down, and I went all in. It was more aggressive than I usually play, but I had the hand to back it up. Callan sat there for what felt like an eternity, looking at his cards, looking at me, back at his cards. Finally, he folded, and I raked in the pot. Everyone at the table was impressed, giving me congratulations and ribbing Callan for backing down. But Callan just smiled and said, "Good game, Marcus. You're getting harder to read." The thing is, when he folded, I saw his cards. He'd had a straight. He would have beaten me. He'd folded a winning hand, and from the way he'd looked at his cards one last time before mucking them, I think he knew it. I didn't say anything, just collected my chips with hands that were shaking slightly. I won that night, ended up with almost $150, walked back to my apartment in the cold December air, my mind racing. Why would he fold a winning hand? Was I misreading the situation? Maybe he hadn't known. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there, because I wanted them to be there so badly. 3 days later, there was an envelope in my mailbox, thicker than usual. Inside were 2 20s, and a note that was longer than any of the previous ones. It said, "Marcus, I know you won this fair and square, but I still want you to have this. You've become one of my favorite parts of living in this building. These poker nights, our random coffee meetups, the conversations in the hallway that somehow last 45 minutes without either of us noticing the time. I don't have a lot of close friends in this city yet, and you've made it feel more like home. Thank you for that. I hope this doesn't weird you out, but I wanted you to know. Merry Christmas, Callan." I read that note probably 50 times. Sat on my couch with my cat, Oliver, curled up next to me, reading it until I'd memorized every word. The phrase, "one of my favorite parts," kept echoing in my head. What did that mean? How much was I reading into this? I wanted to march down to his apartment and ask him directly, but I was terrified. Terrified of being wrong. Of ruining whatever we had. Of having to face the truth about my own feelings. Christmas came and went. I went home to visit my family. Spent the holidays answering my mom's questions about why I was still single, deflecting my sister's attempts to set me up with her co-workers. The whole time I kept thinking about Callan and wondering what he was doing. If he was with family or friends. If he ever thought about me the way I thought about him. I got back to my apartment on the 28th, and there was a small package in my mailbox along with my held mail. Brown paper wrapping, my name on top in that familiar handwriting. Inside was a book, the one I'd mentioned wanting to read, and another note. Saw this and thought of you. Hope your holidays were good. See you at the next game, Callan. That's when I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living in this liminal space, afraid to acknowledge what I was feeling. I spent New Year's Eve alone, which was my choice. Turned down invitations because I needed time to think, to really sit with these feelings and accept them. I was attracted to Callan, more than attracted. I was falling for him, had maybe already fallen, and that meant I wasn't straight. Or at least not entirely. That meant my whole understanding of my identity needed to shift. It should have been scary, and parts of it were. But mostly, I felt this enormous sense of clarity, like I'd been trying to solve a puzzle with the wrong pieces for years, and suddenly someone had handed me the right ones, and everything clicked into place. All those relationships that had felt slightly off, that sense of waiting for something I couldn't name, the way I'd never quite understood what everyone else seemed to feel so easily. It all made sense now. The first poker night of the new year was on a Tuesday in mid-January. I'd barely slept the night before, rehearsing what I wanted to say to Callan. I'd decided to talk to him after the game, maybe suggest we grab a drink, and then just be honest. Tell him I'd noticed the notes, that I appreciated them more than he knew, that I'd been feeling things I'd never felt before, and I thought maybe he was feeling them too. Simple, direct, honest. Except when I got to the rec room, Callan wasn't there. I tried not to let my disappointment show, played a few hands, but my heart wasn't in it. About an hour in, I made an excuse and left. Went back to my apartment feeling deflated and ridiculous. Of course he wasn't there. He had a life, other plans. I was building this up into something it probably wasn't. I was making tea in my kitchen when there was a knock on my door. I opened it, and Callan was standing there in jeans and a grey t-shirt, looking nervous in a way I'd never seen him look before. His hair was slightly messy, or like he'd been running his hands through it, and he was holding a bottle of wine. "Hey," he said. "Sorry I missed the game. Can I come in?" I stepped aside and he walked into my apartment, looking around at my space like he was memorizing it. Oliver immediately went over to investigate, and Callan crouched down to pet him, which gave me a moment to try to calm my racing heart. "I've been trying to figure out how to do this," Callan said, still petting Oliver, not looking at me. "The notes, the money, all of it. I kept thinking you'd say something, or I'd say something, but we both just kept dancing around it." "Callan," I started, but he held up a hand. "Let me get this out, okay? I'm not good at this, at being vulnerable, but you deserve honesty." He stood up, finally meeting my eyes. "I like you, Marcus. More than like you. I have since that first poker night when you walked in and I thought, oh, this is going to be complicated. I started leaving those notes because I wanted an excuse to reach out, to have some kind of connection with you outside of the games. And I kept doing it because every time I saw you, it got harder to pretend I didn't feel this way." The room felt very small suddenly, the air charged with everything unspoken between us. I could hear my own breathing, could see the way Callan's hands were clenched at his sides, like he was bracing for rejection. "I folded that hand in December," he continued. "The one where you went all in. I knew I had you beat. But you looked so happy, so confident, and I just wanted you to have that win. Which is probably the stupidest reason to fold a good hand, but there it is. I knew," I said quietly. "I saw your cards when you mucked them." He looked surprised. "You knew?" "I knew." I took a step closer to him, my heart hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Callan, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you that I feel the same way. I've been terrified because this is all new for me. I've never felt like this about anyone, let alone another man. But I can't stop thinking about you. I look forward to finding your notes more than anything else in my week. When I'm not with you, I'm thinking about when I'll see you next. And I'm tired of being scared of what that means." The expression on his face was something between hope and disbelief. "Really? Really?" I closed the remaining distance between us, and suddenly we were standing close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with laundry detergent. "I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before, but I want to try." if you're willing to be patient with me while I figure it out. Callan reached up slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and cupped my face with one hand. His palm was warm against my cheek, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "I can be patient," he said softly. "I'm good at waiting for things that matter." When he kissed me, it was gentle and tentative, a question more than a statement. I kissed him back, and it was like something inside me that had been locked away suddenly opened up. This was what I'd been waiting for. This feeling of absolute rightness, of coming home to a place I didn't even know existed. We stood in my kitchen kissing until Oliver meowed indignantly at being ignored, and we broke apart laughing. "So," Callan said, his forehead resting against mine, "does this mean I can stop being subtle with the notes?" "You call that subtle?" I thought I was being very restrained, actually. "You should see the notes I didn't send." We opened the wine and sat on my couch talking until almost 3 in the morning. I told him about my confusion over the years, the relationships that never felt quite right, the moment I'd realized what I was feeling for him, and what it meant about myself. He told me about coming out in college, the challenges and the relief of finally being honest, how he'd been drawn to me immediately but hadn't wanted to assume anything or make me uncomfortable. "I kept thinking maybe I was reading too much into things," he admitted. "Like maybe you were just a really friendly straight guy, and I was projecting what I wanted to see." "I was a really confused not straight guy who didn't realize he wasn't straight until you came along," I corrected, which is apparently a thing that can happen at 32. "Sexuality is fluid," Callan said with a shrug. "There's no timeline for figuring yourself out. What matters is that you're being honest with yourself now." We didn't label what we were that night, didn't make big declarations or plans. We just existed together in that space of new possibility, holding hands on my couch, talking and laughing and occasionally kissing until we both felt drunk on it. When Callan finally left around 3:30, walking the short distance to his apartment, I closed my door and leaned against it, grinning like an idiot. The next poker night, we played as usual, but everything was different. Our eyes met across the table constantly, these shared looks that felt like secrets. When we'd both fold and have to wait for a hand to finish, we'd talk quietly, our knees touching under the table. I lost money that night, too distracted to play well, and I didn't care even a little bit. There was no envelope in my mailbox the next day, and I felt a strange pang of loss. Those notes had become precious to me, tangible proof of Callan's feelings during all those weeks of uncertainty. But when I got home from work, Callan was waiting outside my apartment door with takeout and that smile that made my chest tight. "I figured I could deliver this in person now," he said, holding up the bag of food. "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay." We fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Callan would come over after work some nights, or I'd go to his place. We'd cook dinner together, watch movies, talk for hours about everything and nothing. I met his friends, and he met mine. Janet from work figured it out immediately when I mentioned Callan for the 3rd time in one conversation, and her face lit up with understanding and happiness for me. My family took a little longer to tell, but when I finally called my sister and explained, she just said, "Oh, thank God, I was starting to think you were going to be alone forever." When do I get to meet him? The poker games continued, our monthly tradition. Callan still won more often than not, but now when he won, he'd kiss me afterward in the privacy of one of our apartments and say something like, "I'd share all my winnings with you if you'd let me." "Keep your money," I'd tell him. "I've got everything I need." But one night in April, about 4 months after that first kiss in my kitchen, I came home to find an envelope in my mailbox. My name on the front in Callan's handwriting, just like old times. Inside was a key and a note that said, "I know we've been taking things slow, and I don't want to rush you. But I also don't want to spend another night falling asleep without you. This is a key to my apartment. Use it whenever you want or don't use it at all. No pressure. Just possibility. I love you, Marcus. I think I have since that first poker night, and I'm tired of keeping that to myself." Callan. I stood in the mailroom with that key and note, and I was crying. Happy tears, overwhelmed tears. Tears for the person I used to be, who was so lost, and the person I was becoming who felt so found. I walked straight to Callan's apartment and let myself in with the key. He was in the kitchen making dinner, and he turned when he heard the door, his expression uncertain. "I love you too," I said. "And I don't want to spend another night without you either." We moved in together officially in June, combining our apartments into his larger unit. My mailbox stays in my name though, and sometimes even now Callan will leave me notes there. Not money anymore, just small messages. "Thinking about you. Can't wait to see you tonight. Remember when we were both too scared to say what we felt? Oh, I'm glad we got over that." I keep every single one in a box in our closet, a collection of moments that changed my life. The poker games still happen monthly. We still play, still trash talk, still laugh with our neighbors over cards and cheap beer. But now, when the night ends and everyone goes home, Callan and I walk back to our apartment together. We'll debrief the evening, talk about who played well and who was bluffing too much. And then we'll go to bed in the home we've built together, and I'll fall asleep grateful for every single day that led me to this moment. People ask me, sometimes when I knew I was in love with him. I tell them about the notes, about finding those envelopes and reading them over and over, about how poker night became the highlight of my week, not because of the cards, but because of the man across the table. I tell them about being 32 and discovering something fundamental about myself that I had missed for years, about how scary and wonderful it was to let myself feel something I'd never felt before. But the truth is, I think I knew that very first night. When Callan looked up from his cards and smiled at me, and something in my chest stopped working properly. I just needed time to let my mind catch up to what my heart already understood. That sometimes the best things in life come disguised as ordinary moments. A neighbor, a poker game, an envelope in your mailbox with your name written in careful handwriting. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it's quiet and patient, leaving you notes and waiting for you to be ready to read what they really say. I'm ready now. More than ready. And every day with Callan feels like opening my mailbox and finding something precious waiting for me. A reminder that I'm loved, that I'm seen, that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. With him. In this life we're building together. One day, one moment, one shared glance across a poker table at a time.